Okay, there's a sentence that almost everyone has said at least once in their lives. All start on Monday. It sounds kind of harmless, responsible even, like we're being organized and thoughtful about change. But for many people, Monday never actually comes. Now, what I mean by that is that Monday becomes this magical line in the sand. The day that a better version of yourself finally shows up, or you just show up. I mean, it's the day that new habits start. You become more disciplined and motivation kicks in. But then Monday comes and life happens. And suddenly we're renegotiating with ourselves about next Monday. Oh, we'll just do it next week. It's not that urgent. How many times have you said that? Or, you know, oh, it's raining. I shouldn't do it today. It's better to start on another day. Next week's better. How many times have you said that or heard that? Listen, I've done that several times. I'm Yayoi Komiyama of Brain to Belly Coaching, and I'm the host of I'll Start on Monday, the podcast. I'm deeply fascinated with this idea because I lived it myself. I've experienced it myself. There was a period in my life when I knew that I needed help. I needed to take that one step that was going to change everything. But it was so frightening to take that one step. And, from a logical point of view, it's a nothing step. And probably from a different perspective, if somebody else saw it, it was like, that's like nothing. Why couldn't you do it? But, internally, for me, it was frightening. I was fearful that I was going to be judged, that I was going to disappoint myself. I second guessed myself on everything. And it took me over a year to take that one step. I would go, it was to sign up for something. I would go and I would chicken out and I would say, nope, I'll do it next Monday or I'll do it tomorrow. And then it never came. And it wasn't because it was a big step. It was just, like I said, it was just to sign up for something. And it wasn't complicated. Yet that hesitation, that self-doubt, that noise in your head that says, oh, we can do it another time. We don't have to do it today, kept coming up. And it usually does come up when we're trying to change our lives, when we're trying to do something that changes the pattern in our lives. And to be honest with you, when I actually took that first step, it wasn't on a Monday. It was actually on a Thursday. And I still remember that it was a Thursday. This was over 20 years, 25 years ago, actually. It started on a Thursday. And there wasn't anything magical about that Thursday, just a regular Thursday. You know, there wasn't any cosmic thing going on. The stars didn't align. The world didn't shift, you know, but something important changed inside me. I stopped waiting for that perfect moment because I knew there wasn't going to be a perfect moment, that if I didn't do it now, I would regret it. And I probably would have hated myself for not doing it. There's that story that many mentors, like the big guys, Tony Robbins, Joseph McClendon, they always say, when is the best time to plant a tree? Well, the best time to plant a tree, according to these people, is 10 years ago. And the second best time is now, to take action now. And on that Thursday, that's what I decided, that it was time to make that change. And it was because I realized at that point that if I didn't do it now, I would regret it, that I would hate myself even more if I didn't do it at that time. And I didn't want people to feel that I was giving them evidence of what a poor person I was, how I would, people would say to me, oh, you wouldn't amount to anything. And I wanted to prove them wrong. So that's why I started on that Thursday. So if you've been following this podcast isn't really about Mondays. It's about that human space here where we delay, where we procrastinate, where we hesitate, where we plan and plan and plan and overthink things, when we start doubting ourselves and we just stay stuck in one place. We're just running around in circles, or we're on that hamster wheel and we just keep going and going and going. But what are we doing? We're just going around in a circle. We're staying stuck. And we keep on thinking we're doing something, but we're really being stuck. So, if you've ever postponed anything that you cared about, you're not unusual. You're just human, like all of us. And let me tell you, you're not alone. So on this show, each week, what'll happen is we'll have a conversation with a guest who comes, and I'll have guests from all walks of life. I'll have podcasters, coaches, creators, leaders, just regular individuals as well from different backgrounds. But we'll be all exploring some version of the same experience. That experience of waiting. Why do we wait? Why do we hesitate? Why do we postpone? Why do we procrastinate? We'll have many versions of that. You'll hear many versions of that, but you'll also hear many versions of what finally helped them to move, to take that first step, to plant that tree now, right? Because sometimes when you hear somebody else's story, their struggle, the patterns that they have, or the turning point that changed everything for them, what you might hear is, or you might recognize is, you might see yourself in that. You might say, hey, I kind of recognize that. I'm going through that right now. And they were able to change. Well, maybe that gives me hope. Maybe I can change. Maybe I can take that step. Maybe I can model that person. Maybe there's hope. And that's what I want to give you. In my professional life as a neural health coach, a transformation strategist, you know, my days are filled with people's mindset. What do we think? How thinking affects our behavior, and how our behavior creates beliefs in ourselves, and beliefs create identity. And I work with that. And it's a fascinating thing that our brain does, is we we can influence our brain and change the way that we think so that we could change the way that we take action and feel. So, my interest in this is very, very personal. Um, as you know, or many of you know, I've been in the wellness industry for 25 years, and I've seen so many cases of these intelligent, capable people struggling up here because of self-doubt, hesitation, what Joseph McClendon and the Neuroencoding Institute call the toxic 10, or what Dr. Daniel Amen called the ants, automatic negative thoughts, ants, and how they crawl in our head. And what they do is they hinder clarity. And it's all based out of fear. The fear of rejection being the most scary one. The one that really, really not helps us, actually makes us stop doing what we want to do. That fear is what we'll hear a lot about it in this podcast, and we'll hear it from different people and how they overcame that fear. So my hope that is that you'll hear one conversation, maybe an idea, a story that might help you see a pattern that you're living, or that you see something of yourself in. And maybe you'll see something that'll help you get unstuck, help you to see clarity. So, I've talked about myself and how I've struggled with different things in my life. And what happened, 25 years ago is really that I decided that it was time for me to get unstuck. That, like I said, I was going to defy the odds. I was going to prove people wrong, that I wasn't going to conveniently, um, conveniently be what they expected me to be. I was going to be different. And that's what helped me. And that was because I was able to see that and overcome that fear. Believe me, it was scary. And it was just to sign up for one small thing that was going to change my whole life. And that was to get help. I was so scared to get help that I knew I needed to work on my body image, to work on my issues with my self-confidence. It was something that I needed to do for myself. And I am so glad I took that one step back then, because I wouldn't be who I am now if I hadn't done that. I would never have gotten onto this path of personal development and learned and grown from those experiences. Believe me, I've had my share of pain, and I'm sure all of you do. But it's how we use that. And, I could talk to you, believe me, forever about myself, but let's find out about me through my podcast, through my interviews with other people. And if you want to find out more about me, you can go to my website, Brain to Belly Coaching, or you can join my Facebook group, Brain to Belly, or you can read about my experiences in the book, Turning Pain into Her Power, which is on Amazon. And that's what I wanted to share, is that we all go through pain of some sort. We all have this chatter going on in our brains sometimes. It's how we can combat that. And there's so many different ways to do that. And my guests will all show you different ways and different things that you might be able to relate to. So my hope is that you will take something from this podcast and use it for yourself, to develop yourself, to better yourself, to find that joy, to find that happiness that we all deserve. So thank you for spending time with me today. And until next time, please, please remember that change doesn't begin on a Monday. It begins the moment you stop negotiating with yourself. So I'm Coach Yayoi. I'm the host of I'll Start on Monday, the podcast, and I'll see you next time. So I'm out. Thank you guys. Bye.